Good day to each and everyone. My name is Desiree Espinosa from BSed English 1B. So today I will be discussing to you who is Charles Hackett and his 16 design features of language. Who is Charles Hackett? Charles Hackett was an American linguist and anthropologist who lived from 1916 to 2000. Hackett graduated from Yale in 1939 and later taught at both Cornell and Rice. Hackett made significant contributions to structural linguistics as well as the study of Native American, Chinese, and Fijian languages. His work focused mainly on detailed linguistic analysis, particularly morphology and phonology, and on the concepts and tools that facilitated such analysis. Up until the 1950s, language was largely viewed as a social behavioral phenomenon. Hackett was challenged in this belief by Noam Chomsky, who argued that language is biologically based and innate. Chomsky believed that humans share a universal grammar that ties all languages together. Hackett staunchly opposed this Chomskyan concept of the nature of language. However, Hackett is most famous for defining what he called the design feature of language, which demonstrated his belief about the commonalities among human languages. Hackett's design features are a set of features that characterize human language and set it apart from animal communication. They were defined by a linguist, Charles F. Hackett, in the 1960s. He called these characteristics the design features of language. Hackett originally believed that there to be 13 design features, while primate communication utilizes that the first 9 features, the final 4 features, or should be called that displacement, productivity, cultural transmission, and doability, are reserved for humans. Hackett later added prevarication, reflexiveness, and learnability to the list as uniquely human characteristics. He asserted that even the most basic languages possess these 16 features. We have vocal auditory channel, broadcast transmission and directional reception, transitoriness, interchangeability, total feedback, specialization, semanticity, arbitrariness, discreteness, displacement, productivity, traditional transmission, duality of patterning, prevarication, reflexiveness, and learnability. The first design of Charles Hackett is vocal auditory channel. Vocal auditory channel refers to the idea that speaking or hearing is the mode humans use for language. When Hackett first defined this feature, it did not take sign language into account, which reflects the ideology of orality that was prevalent during that time. This feature has since been modified to include other channels of language such as tactile, visual, or chemical olfactory. Next is we have broadcast transmission and directional reception. When humans speak, sounds are transmitted in all directions. However, listeners perceive the direction from which the sounds are coming. Similarly, signers broadcast to potentially anyone within the line of sight, while those watching see who is signing. This is the characteristic of most forms of human and animal communication. Next is we have transitoriness. Transitoriness, also called rapid fading. Transitoriness refers to the temporary quality of language. Language sounds exist for only the brief period of time after which they are no longer perceived. Sound waves quickly disappear once a speaker stops speaking. This is also true of signs. In contrast, other forms of communication, such as writing and our Inca quipus or not typing, are more permanent. Next is we have interchangeability. Interchangeability refers to the idea that humans can give and receive identical linguistic signals. Humans are not limited in the types of messages they can say or hear. One can say I am a boy even if one is a girl. This is not to be confused with lying or should be called prevarication. The importance is that a speaker can physically create any and all messages regardless of their truth or relations to the speaker. In other words, anything that one can hear, one can also say. Not all species possess this feature. For example, in order to communicate their status, queen ants produce chemical scents that no other ants can produce. Next is we have total feedback. Speakers of a language can hear their own speech and can control and modify what they are saying as they say it. Similarly, signers see, feel, and control their signing. Next is we have specialization. The purpose of linguistic signal is communication and not some other biological function. When humans speak or sign, it is generally intentional. An example of non-specialized communication is the dog panting. When the dog pants, it often communicates to its owner that it is hot or thirsty. However, the dog pants in order to cool itself off. This is a biological function and the communication is a secondary matter. Next is we have semanticity. Specific sound signals are directly tied to certain meanings. Next is we have arbitrariness. Languages are generally made up of both arbitrary and iconic symbols. In spoken languages, iconicity takes the form of onomatopoeia. For the vast majority of other symbols, there is no intrinsic or logical connection between a sound form and what it refers to. Almost all names a human language attributes an object are thus arbitrary. Spoken words are really nothing like the objects they represent. This is further demonstrated by the fact that different languages attribute very different names to the same object. However, many other signs are not iconic, and the relationship between forms and meaning is arbitrary. Thus, while Hackett did not account for the possibility of non-arbitrary form-meaning relationship, the principle still generally applies. Next is we have discreteness. Linguistic representations can be broken down into small discrete units which combine with each other in rule-governed ways. They are perceived categorically, not continuously. For example, English marks number with the plural morpheme s, which can be added to the end of any noun. The plural morpheme is perceived categorically, not continuously. We cannot express smaller or larger quantities by varying how loudly we pronounce the s. Next is we have displacement. Displacement refers to the idea that humans can talk about things that are not physically present or that do not even exist. Speakers can talk about the past and the future and can express also the hopes and dreams. A human speech is not limited to here and now. Displacement is one of the features that separates humans' language from other forms of primate communication. Next is we have productivity. Productivity refers to the idea that language users can create and understand novel utterances. Humans are able to produce an unlimited amount of utterances. Also, related to the productivity is the concept of grammatical patterning, which facilitates the use and comprehension of language. Language is not stagnant but is constantly changing. New idioms are created all the time, and the meaning of signals can vary depending on the context and situation. Next is we have traditional transmission. Traditional transmission, also known as cultural transmission. Traditional transmission is the idea that while humans are born with innate language capabilities, Language is learned after birth in social setting. It differs critically from Chomsky's idea of universal grammar, but rather purports that people learn how to speak by interacting with experienced languages users. Significantly, language and culture are woven together in these constructs, functioning hand in hand for language acquisition. Next is we have the duality of patterning. Meaningful messages are made up of distinct smaller meaningful units which themselves are made up of distinct smaller meaningless units or should be called phonemes. Next is the prevarication. Prevarication is the ability to lie or deceive. When using language, humans can make false or meaningless statements. This is an important distinction made of human communication. Example, language as compared to animal communication. While animal communication can display a few other design features proposed by Hackett, animal communication is unable to lie or make up something that does not exist or have reference. Next is we have reflexiveness. Humans can use language to talk about language. Also a very defining feature of human language. Reflexiveness is a trait not shared by animal communication. With reflexiveness, humans can describe what language is, talk about the structure of language, and discuss the idea of language with others using language. Last but not the least is the learnability. Language is teachable and learnable. In the same way as a speaker learns their first language, the speaker is able to learn other languages. It is worth noting that young children can learn language with competence and ease. However, language acquisition is constrained by a critical period such that it becomes more difficult once children pass a certain age.